Right. So yesterday we have started with the programming part, and we understood the basic what statements related to what ABAP. Basic statements related to ABAP. So we have started with the programming part yesterday. Let me open that. So I'll go to ABAP editor SC38. What was the object name? Z10am program 1. So in this object, we have seen about write statement, data statement, and constants, all those things. Okay, we understood how to declare the variables, uh, how to declare the variables, how to display the result. We have seen some options related to data keyword and what write keyword. Okay, so in continuation to this, let's go for a new requirement. So here the requirement is, see here, uh, when I execute my ABAP report, so assume that this is the ABAP report, try to understand this. This is my ABAP program. So whenever I execute the ABAP program, I should get a screen for reading the input. Okay, so this screen where we read the input, we call it as what? Selection screen. Understood? So in ABAP, in SAP, wherever we read the input from the user, that screen we call it as what? Selection screen. So on this selection screen, I want some input field, something like this. So assume that I require a selection screen which should contain some input fields, two input fields. The user should be able to enter two integers. Let me give the text as something, enter first number and enter second number. Enter first number and enter second number. And in the same selection screen, okay, in the same selection screen, I want some radio buttons, okay, so that the user can select the options. So assume that I require some 5 radio buttons. Yeah, so I require some 5 radio buttons, and the options should be something like this. Here the option should be addition, okay, difference. Assume here the option is something product. Assume this is division, and this is something what none. Okay, so I want some 5 radio buttons. The option should be something like this, and I want some validations on this. Okay, on this selection screen, I want some validations to be performed. So the validations are, okay, default the two input fields, default the two input fields with what something 10 and what 20. 10 and 20 means whenever this selection screen is displayed, I want some default values to be displayed here. Assume that here I need to display 10, here I need to display what 20. Okay, I need to default the input fields with 10 and 20. And then what is the other validation? By default the fifth radio button should be selected. By default the fifth radio button should be selected, means as and when the selection screen is displayed, okay, I want this fifth radio button to be selected by default. What is the fifth radio button here? Something what? None. This should be selected by default. That is the second validation. And the other validation is restrict the user to select only one radio button. Restrict the user to select only one radio button at any point of time. Restrict the user to select only one radio button at any point of time. Means, suppose assume that the moment the selection screen is displayed, what is the radio button selected here? None. So in the runtime, assume that I'll select difference. Then I'll select product. The moment I select product, the previously selected radio button should be deselected. Means I should allow the user to select only one choice. User cannot select what? Multiple choice. User should be able to select only one choice. And the last validation is uh, what? On clicking the execute button. So selection screen will contain one button called as execute button. Okay. On clicking the execute button, what you have to do? Identify the Our program should identify the selected radio button. Identify the selected radio button. Perform the required operation. Perform the required operation and display the result. Display the result in what? LPS, the output screen, that is list processing screen. Output screen we call it as what? List processing screen, and the input screen we call it as what? Selection screen. So this selection screen is nothing but what? Input screen, where the user is going to input the values. So what is the requirement here? Suppose if I select what product, what should happen? On executing this selection screen, I should display the result on my output screen, which we call it as what? LPS. Product is something what? 200. Okay. In case if I select what? This product radio button, I need to display this. So this screen we call it as what? LPS. In short, we call it as LPS. Nothing but what? List processing screen. List processing screen. In simple terminology, I'll call it as what? Output screen, where the result is shown. So this is the sequence of my program execution. I repeat this. I need to develop the ABAP program, ABAP object. On executing this ABAP object, I mean to say the program, I should get a selection screen where the user should be able to input some two integers, and the selection screen should contain 5 radio buttons. By default, the fifth radio button should be selected. In the runtime means during program execution. In the runtime, the user will select any one of the radio button. I should restrict the user to select only one radio button. After selecting the radio button, on the selection screen, we'll have something called as the execute button. Whenever I execute the selection screen, I need to display the appropriate operation. If I selected product, I should get product. If I select difference, I should get what? Different. So here agenda is what? Not to do addition subtraction. Agenda is how to generate this selection screen, how to read the input values from the user, how to design the radio buttons, how to identify the selected radio buttons, how to restrict the user to select only one radio button at any point of time. So this is the overall requirement. Let me save it in your folder. Right. Okay. So let me connect to the server. So how do we develop these ABAP objects? As part of ABAP editor, I'll go to SC38. Since it is a custom object, we need to start with what? Z or Y. We call it as what? Z. I'll give the object name as Z10am program 2. Yesterday we have done what? Program 1. So Z10am program 2. Provide some object name starting with Z or Y. Right. So after providing the object name, click on create button. Provide some any titles, any meaningful title you can provide. I'll give it as something selection screen radio buttons. Selection screen radio buttons. Type of program is executable program. Okay. So in this drop down, as of now, we are discussing only what? Executable program. We don't know about other things. So I'll choose what? Executable program. I will save it. Since we don't have any package, since we don't have any directory, I'll save it in what? Local object. Right. Okay. So let me remove these comments. So try to understand what is the, let us not focus on the entire requirement. Don't ever focus on the complete requirement. Do it part by part. So initially what I want, the moment I execute the program, I should get a selection screen where I need to read some two integers from the user. So if you take our C language, in C language, how do we read the input from the user? by using a statement called as scanf. By using scanf, we can read the input. If you take C++, we use what? cin. We use cin. In case of Java, okay, in case of Java, we use system.in.read. Similarly, in case of ABAP, okay, we have a statement. We have a keyword called as parameters. Parameters is a statement which will generate the selection screen for reading the input. I can use either parameter or parameters. Both are what? Same. Either parameter or parameters. Parameters. I have to give the variable name. Yesterday, uh, I declared the variables by using what keyword? Data keyword. But in the yesterday's case, let me open that. I'll open the yesterday's program, or let me open in the new session. Why to close this? I'll open it in the new session. How do you open the new session here? On the application toolbar, we have a button what? Sorry, on the standard toolbar. This is standard toolbar. We have a button called as new session. I'll click on this. It will open the new session. Yeah, here I'll go to ABAP editor. What is the object name? Yesterday's object name Z10M program 1. Provide the object name and display it. So yesterday, in the yesterday's program, we have declared the variables by using what keyword? Data keyword. Understood? We declared by using data keyword. Okay, this is one way of declaring the variables. Today also, how many values I have to read from the user? I need to read two values from the user. What kind of values? They are integers, no? So since we have to read these values in the runtime on the selection screen, I should not use data keyword. I should use what? Parameters keyword. So I'll say parameters. You can give any variable name. I'll give the variable name as Gensoft Tech. Some variable name I'm giving. Generally, we'll give it in a short form like X, Y kind of thing. But I gave something like the Gensoft Tech type what? I. Gensoft Tech type I. I indicates what here? Integer. Since I want to read integers, I declare the data type as what? Integer. What is the variable name? Gensoft Tech. So yesterday, the same thing we declared by using what keyword? Data keyword. But data keyword will not generate any selection screen. Now the requirement is I need to generate the selection screen so that the user can input the values in the runtime. For that reason, I am using what? Parameters keyword. So let me check the syntax. Control S, save it. Check for the syntax errors. Control F2. It is saving. Hold on, please. Yeah, it is saved. Let me do the syntax check. Control F2. So when I do the syntax check, I got an error. Control F2. This button. What is the error I got? Syntax error for the program 2. What is the error here in the line number 3? The parameter name Gensoft Tech here can be up to 8 characters long. Yesterday, when we declared the variable using data keyword, we understood that the variable name should not exceed more than 30 characters. Here, if you declare the variable by using parameters keyword, if you declare the variables by using parameters keyword, it is saying that the variable name cannot exceed more than 8 characters. So I need to give it in what? Less than or equal to what? 8 characters. So let me give it as something gens of type I. Let me save. No errors. Control F2. No errors. Program is what? No syntax errors. Let me activate it. How do we activate? Control F3. Activate button on the standard toolbar. Enter. It is activated. The status of the object is what? Active. So when I execute, when I say F8, what happened here? I got a screen. This screen where we can enter the input, we call it as what? Selection screen. Understood? This is the selection screen. Am I clear? So how do we generate the selection screen? By using what? Parameters statement. Right? So what is the variable name I gave? Gensoft. Okay. So earlier, initially what I did, I gave more than what? 8 characters. If I give like this, it was giving what? Syntax error. So what I'll do for your reference, let me comment it. How to comment? At the beginning of the line, you have to say what? Star. Let me give a comment here. Syntax error. So what is the change I have done? Instead of using more than 8 characters, I use less than or equal to 8 characters. Done. I got the variable. I got the selection screen. Done. But instead of giving this lengthy variable name, in general, we'll give what? Short form. So I'll just comment this or. Okay, understood. This is okay. But and instead of giving this lengthy variable name, I want to give a variable names in short form. So I'll say what? Parameters, right? How many variable, how many input values I want to read from the user? 2 input values. Yesterday, again, if you remember, I told that in most of the projects, variable names you'll declare by using what v underscore. Na? The variable names you'll start with what? V underscore. It is only a recommendation. Project to project, the standards might be different, but whatever we are discussing is the generalized standards. Similarly, the parameter variables also in most of the projects will start with what? P underscore. So that by looking at that, we understand that it is what? By looking at that, we understand that it is what? Parameter variable. Okay, so I'll say P underscore. I'll give a short form. What is that? P underscore X type I. I require one more variable. Na? So I'll say parameters P underscore Y type I. I indicates what here? Integer. So let me do the syntax check, save it, Control F2. No syntax error. Let me activate. When I execute, I got the selection screen where the user can input what? 2 values here. Okay. So already we have seen yesterday. Instead of using this statement twice, I can declare these 2 variables using single parameters. Na? So what I can do, let me comment this. How do you comment? Select these lines, hold the control key and this less than symbol, you'll get the star. Otherwise, you can comment it one by one. At the beginning of the line, it's a star, so that the entire line will be commented. Okay, so here I'll give a comment. How do you give the comment in between? Double quotes. Whatever you write after double quotes, it is considered as comment. So what is the agenda here? By using single parameters keyword, I want to declare both the variables. So parameters. Yesterday we have seen whenever you are performing multiple operations, using single statement, we have to use what? Chain operators. Parameters P underscore X type what? I, comma, and here I'll give another variable P underscore Y type what? I. So using single parameter statement, I am trying to declare what? Both the variables. So when I execute here, I got the same look and feel. So I'm using what here? Chain operator, and don't give period here, give comma. I can write like this also. Immediately after the comma, I can write this, no problem. But what happens? We have to take care of what? Readability also. I got the same thing. So to take care of the readability, I'm putting in the next line. And from year to year, it is considered only one statement. Till you give period, entire thing is considered one statement. Done. Now when I execute, I got the selection screen. What is displayed here? P underscore X and what? P underscore Y. Suppose if I give a variable name as ABC, P underscore ABC, the P underscore ABC will be displayed there now. What is the variable name? P underscore ABC. So as it is displayed. Okay. So we are generating this selection screen for whose purpose? Customer purpose. So always you have to keep customer in mind. Means when the selection screen is displayed, by looking at this description, the user should be able to understand what he has to do. So what I want here, I want the meaningful text here. Enter first number and what? Enter second number. I want the meaningful text. Enter first number and enter second number I want. So what I'll do here, I cannot say like this now. P underscore what? Enter second number I can't say, because just now we have seen parameter variable name cannot exceed more than 8 characters. I got an error. The parameter name can be up to what? 8 characters. So I'll give short form only, but I need to provide the selection text. So what you have to do is, after activating your object, after activating your program, in the program itself, I'll choose the menu go to. Am I clear? After declaring the variables, after activating the program, I'll choose the menu go to text elements. We have a tab called as what? Selection text. I'll click on the selection text. When I click on the selection text, it is showing what? Both the parameter variables, question mark and some dots are there. Remove this and place your meaningful label. So I'll just remove this. I'll give it as what? Something, enter what? First number. Type whatever you want. Here I'll give it as something, enter what? Second number. Like this, provide the meaningful text for your parameter variables. Activate the selection text. Let me save it first. Okay, save it and then you need to what? Activate. Control F3. The selection text is what? The report text is what? Activated. Go back. In the program, the variable names are still X and Y only. So when I execute, we are getting the selection screen with the meaningful description. So that by looking at this, the user will understand what he has to do. Always remember, we are developing the objects keeping the customer in mind. So the screen should be what? User friendly. By looking at that screen, the user should understand what he needs to do, right? So we understood how to read the input. So here I can give some values here, 88 and 12, and when I click on the execute button, I should do the appropriate operation. So before I continue, any questions so far, please ask. No questions? Right. Okay, so now let us focus on the other part. So what is the other requirement here? If you see the validations, if you see the requirement here, default the two input fields with what? 10 and what? 20. Means the moment the selection screen is displayed, I want some initial values, default values here, something 10 and what? 20. So how do we do it? Observe here. Here I'll say, yesterday for data statement, for data keyword, we have seen some additions, some options like value keyword. And if you take right statement, we have seen some additions like left justified, right justified, centered, color, blah, blah, blah. Similarly, for parameters also, you will have some additions, okay, or we call them as options. There is an option called as default. Default, what is that? 10, I'll say. I cannot give whatever I want, that addition should be available. Default, I'll give it as a 20. Let me check what happened. Save, check, activate, done. When I execute, yes, I got what? 10 and 20. In the runtime, this is runtime now. User can change the values. User can change the values. Sometimes what happens, my customer will say that I should not allow the user to modify this value. Always it should be fixed. So I have to make this as what? Read only. It should not be editable. So how to do that? Again, it will come later on. I need to write some logic for that. At this stage, we are not in a position to write that logic. So just ignore that. Okay. And I forgot one more thing. In the same validation, default the two input fields got 10 and 20, and both the fields should be what? Mandatory. Means compulsory. The user has to what? Enter the data. If the user doesn't enter the data, I should not allow to execute the program. Means suppose here I'll remove this 10. I may click on execute button. So yesterday we understood, if you don't store any value in integers, it will take 0. But what I want here, when I execute, these two fields should be what? Mandatory. Should be compulsory, obligatory. Okay, if the user has entered these two field values only, I should be able to execute. Otherwise, I should not allow to execute the selection screen. So how do you do it? Again, for the same parameters, we have an option called as obligatory. Obligatory means what? Mandatory, compulsory. So see now, done, done. When I execute, suppose I'll remove this value. You can see here I got a question mark kind of thing here. Sorry, I got this selection symbol here, which indicates what? It is mandatory. Suppose if I try to execute, what is the message I got in the status bar? Fill out all the required entry fields. Fill out all the required entry fields. Compulsory, the user has to enter the data. Now I'm not entering the data for the second field. You can see I got a tick mark kind of thing. So obligatory is the keyword used for what? Making the selection screen fields as what? Mandatory. Hope it's clear. Okay. Now, what is the next requirement? My selection screen should contain some 5 radio buttons. Na? So our focus now is what? How to design the radio buttons. How to design the radio buttons. How do we design the input field? Something like this. Parameter, some variable name, type what? Integer. Now I want to design some 4 or 5 radio buttons. So how do we design? See this. Here I'll say parameters again. Parameters. Okay, I'll use the chain operator again because I'm going to perform multiple operations. How many radio buttons? Okay, here there are 2 input fields. Now, what are the names of these input fields? P underscore X and what? P underscore Y. Similarly, I require 5 radio buttons. These radio buttons also should have a name. So how do you do it? Parameters. Again, the recommendation is what? Parameter variable name will start with what? P underscore. I can give any name, remember, but I'm trying to follow the standards, generalized standards, which are followed in most of the projects. Okay. Parameters, I'll say P underscore. Let me give the name as something R1, P underscore R1. Okay. Any name you can give. I'll say radio button group. How to make use of this? If you are getting the smart help here, you have to press tab, that will appear radio button group. I'll give a group name. You can give any group name. I'll give it a grp1. I'll say comma like this. Let me design some 5 radio buttons, comma r2, r3, r4, r5. Here at the last statement I'll give period. So from year to year, it is considered only what? One statement. Till we give period, it is part of that particular statement. So I designed 5 radio buttons. What are the names of the radio buttons? P underscore R1, P underscore R2, P underscore R3, R4, R5. And all these radio buttons belongs to the group what? GRP1. What is the group name I give? GRP1. I can give any name. I can give Sridhar. I can give Jansa. Whatever I want. Just to be meaningful, I give it as group 1. So one thing you have to focus here is all the radio buttons belongs to what? Same group. Let me execute now. Check it, activate. When I execute, when I say F8, I got the selection screen which contains 5 radio buttons. Here I should provide the meaningful text, na? Like I should provide what? Addition, difference, product kind of thing. Already we know how to provide the text. And one more point you can observe, which radio button is selected by default here? First one is selected by default. But what is one of my validation? The 5th radio button should be selected by default. Okay, and you can observe here by default here the first one is selected. I'll select the second one. I'll select the second one. What happened? The third one I'm selecting, automatically the other is deselected. I'll choose this one. So the user is able to select only one radio button because all these radio button belongs to what? Same group, GRP1. So now let me provide the selection text for them. How do you provide? Same, after activating the object. Choose the menu, go to text elements, go to the selection text. You have 5 radio button variables. Give the meaningful text, whatever you want. I'll give it as something addition. I might have used them in earlier batch. That's why I'm getting that text by default. Difference. What else? Product. Activate this. Then it's activated. When I say F8, yes, I got the 5 radio button with meaningful text for them. And by default, the first radio button got selected. What is the requirement? By default, 5th one should be selected. So what I'll do for the 5th radio button, for this parameter, I will use an option called as default. I'll say something small x. Default small x. Let's see what happens. When I do syntax check, I got an error. A parameter of a radio button group can only have what? Uppercase X as what? Default value. So you cannot give whatever you want. It should be only what? Uppercase itself. So which one? I'm setting it to X, the 5th one. So see this. When I execute this, I'm executing F8. What is selected now by default? The 5th radio button. So what is the understanding? Whichever radio button you want to select by default, that radio button you have to use the option default and set it to what? X. Now in the runtime, okay, we have 5 radio buttons. Huh? What is the value of radio button now? Space, because it is not selected. P underscore R1 is what? Space. P underscore R2 is also space. P underscore R3 is also space. P underscore R4 is also space. P underscore R5 is what? X. So what is the meaning? A radio button can contain either of these two values, either uppercase X or what? Space. When it will have uppercase X, if it is selected, it will have a value as what? X internally. If it is not selected, it will have a value as what? Space. Okay. Suppose now I'll make, instead of making this as X, I'll make the third radio button. I'll say default what? X. So what happens? The third radio button will be selected by, what is the error was? Yeah, save it. Check for the syntax. Sorry, I gave the single quotes here. Na? That's the issue. Which one is selected by default now? Third one. Now you can see I'm able to select only one radio button because all these radio buttons belongs to what? Same group. For example, here I'll make this as group 2. I'll make this as group 2. So overall we have 2 radio buttons. What is the meaning? In group 1, I can select one radio button. In group 2, I can select what? Another radio button. So when I execute, you can see here, in the first group, third one is selected by default. In the second group, second one is selected by default. Now the user can select any one of the radio button in each group. Okay, but my requirement is what? I should restrict the user to select only one radio button. That is the reason I'm adding all the 4 or 5 radio buttons to what? Same group. Now what you have to do? I'll select either of the radio buttons. I'll click on what? Execute button. I should identify the selected radio button and based on the selection perform the required calculation and display the particular calculation. That is the overall requirement. Before I continue, any questions please ask.
Hello.
Yeah, Madhu, tell me.
Yeah, those just for actually curiosity, I'm asking. Those radio buttons we are just aligning to that, left corner actually. So can we move it a bit actually? I mean, in below to that
Yes,
those gaps actually.
yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Going
How to
forward,
do that? Okay.
when we come to selection skin programming, I can place the fields at my desired position. Means I can place this input field somewhere here. I can place this radio button somewhere here. So wherever you want, you can place. But for that, you require some more knowledge on that. Am I clear? Okay. Suppose here I'll say,
Yes. Yes.
mm, yeah. Suppose I'll say just for showing you. Okay. When I execute this, I got something like this. I want to maintain some space between these input fields and between these radio buttons. So somewhere I'll say selection screen skip 3. Okay, so when I execute, what happened? It has skipped what? 3 lines.
Okay.
Okay, and this labels also I don't want from the left hand side. I want to start in particular position. Everything is achievable, but we need to wait for a few more days for that. Okay, we'll see that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
yeah. Anything else is if we select only default letters X or any, no, a radio button will have only uppercase X, uppercase, not even small case, uppercase X or what? Space has what? Values. Okay, when it is selected, X indicates what? It is selected. X indicates it is selected. Space indicates not selected. So a radio button will have only either uppercase X or space as values, not other than any other letters. That's why initially I tried to give it as lowercase x. So when I do syntax check, okay, I got an error. A parameter of a radio button group can only have what? X as what? Default. So it should be only X or space. Prashant. Is it clear? Yeah. Now, what is the next focus now? The user is going to enter some input values. The user is going to do some selection. When I click on my execute button, by default, the selection screen will have an execute button on the application toolbar. So on executing this, my program should identify the appropriate selected radio button, perform the appropriate operation, and display the result to the user. So let us see that. So the user will select any of these options. For any of these options, I need to do some calculations. I need to store the calculated result. So I require one variable for storing the result now. I require one variable for storing the result. How do I declare the variables? By using data. Why not parameter? If I use parameter, again what happens? One more input field will be generated on the screen. I don't want one more input field. What are the calculation I do? That calculated value should be stored in that variable. That is the reason I'm declaring by using what data keyword. Means the developer has to decide when to go for parameters, when to go for data. We'll go for parameters if you want the user to input the values in the runtime. Okay, otherwise you'll go for declaring the variables using what data keyword. So generally the data variables will start with what? V underscore. In some projects it may start with what? GV underscore. So we need not worry about that. I'm using the generalized standard V underscore. I'll give a meaningful variable name RES. I can give any name. I can give any name. I'm just giving the short name and meaningful name. RES type what? Integer. Done. Okay, I'm declaring this variable also as what? Integer. So what is the requirement now? I need to identify which radio button is what? Selected. Okay, so I need to check the conditions. I need to check the conditions. So if you know any other programming languages like C, C++, Java, .NET, COBOL, whatever it is, we have something called as conditional statements. Conditional statements. To check any condition, we can use if-else block. Here also, we have what? If-else block. So what I'll do here, I'll say, one second, it got stuck. Just hold on, please. Yeah, I need to check the conditions. How do we check? In every programming language, we have some conditional statements to check the conditions. One of the conditional statements is what? If else. So what I will do if how do we identify, how do we check whether radio button is, how do you tell whether radio button is selected or not? If the radio button is selected, the radio button will internally contain the value as what? X. If it is not selected, it will contain what? Space. So I'll say if P underscore R1 is equal to what? X. What is the meaning? If the first radio button is selected, I need to write the logic to perform the addition, display the result. Else if P underscore R2 equal to what? X means when it will come to else if, it will check the first condition. If the first condition is failed, it will check the second condition. Like that, it will check all the conditions one after the other till one of the conditions is satisfied. Else if do so and so. Else if else if what? P underscore R3, sorry, P underscore R3 equal to what? X, capital X, do so and so. Else if P underscore R4 equal to what? Capital X. End for if is what? End if. If you take C, C++, Java, we use this flower brackets kind of thing. If so and so, we'll write the condition. Okay? Am I clear? Something like this. Okay? Then in the else block, we'll check the condition. Again, like this, we'll write the blocks in C, C++, Java. Here, end for if is what? End if. So I use what? End if. So let me write the logic now. If P underscore R1 equal to X means if this condition is satisfied, means the user has selected addition. If this condition is satisfied, I need to perform the addition and display. And where you have to store the result, I declared a variable V underscore what? RES. So I'll say V underscore RES is equal to where you are entering the input values in my variables what? P underscore X and P underscore Y. So I'll say V underscore RES is equal to what? P underscore X plus P underscore Y. Understood? I'm performing the calculation and I'm storing the result in that variable res. How do you display the value of any variable? Yesterday we have seen write statement, which is similar to printf in C language. Okay, so I'll say write. I'll use a chain operator, slash indicates new line. I'll give meaningful text. What is that? Sum of two numbers is, close a string, comma, where the result is stored in v underscore res. No, so print what? V underscore res. Write statement will display this text and the value stored in the variable what? V underscore res. How do we separate these two things? By using what? Comma. Repeat this process, similar process for other conditions also. So here I'll say what is this? Minus a difference of two numbers is so and so. Product of two numbers is so and so. That's all. Division of two numbers is so and so. Okay, I can write one more condition. Else means if all these four radio buttons selected, it means that the last one is automatically selected now. At any point of time, user can select only one radio button. So else means what? If none of the four conditions are satisfied, control comes to else part. Here I'll give a message, some meaningful message. Option not selected. That's all. Let me activate this. Done. I'll execute this. Okay, I'll select product. So internally, what are the values of the radio buttons? P underscore R1 is what? Space. P underscore R2 is also what? Space. P underscore R3 is what? X. Because we have selected that. P underscore R4 is again space. P underscore R5 is again what? Space. Let me execute now. Okay, I'll not enter one of the value, but both the fields are mandatory. Na? So when I click on execute button, I got a message in the status bar. Fill in all the required entry fields. It will not allow you to exit the screen until unless you validate that. Okay, so I'll enter some value, 10 and what, 20. Right, so what I got? Product is what? 200. I'll choose difference or I'll choose division. 10 by 20 is what? 0.5 something like that. 0.5 something like that. What I got? 1. Why I got 1? It will round off to the nearest integer. So it is 0.5. Greater than 0.5 or equal to 0.5. You will get the next what? Result. Nearest integer. Okay. Now I'll choose what? Addition. What I got? Sum of two numbers is so and so. I'll choose a difference. I'll choose difference. What is the expected output? Minus 10. Minus 10. What I got? 10 minus. So we'll address that going forward. I got 10 minus, but internally it is stored as what? Minus 10 only. I'll select none. If we click on execute, I got the message option not selected. So what is the overall meaning? How to identify the selected radio button? If the radio button is selected, the value of the radio button is set to X. Otherwise what? Space. Okay. Any questions, please ask.
So similarly, we can do mandatory for all the radio buttons and display all the results as well. Can you do that? Like,
Okay, what you mean to say is you want the user
okay,
to select multiple options. That's what you're saying.
yeah, the multiple options we can select. Also, we can see the outputs like difference or summation, product. Everything will be displayed one after another. That also possible.
So, okay, if you want the user to select all the radio buttons, first of all, we should not go for radio buttons. Am I clear? When do we go for the radio buttons? When you want the user to select any one value in the list of options, then only we'll go for what? Radio buttons. Now, what you are saying, user might select either one option or multiple options or all the options. At that time, we should not go for radio buttons. We should go for something called as checkboxes. Going forward, we have something called as checkboxes so that the user can select all the values.
Okay,
Here,
okay.
if you want the in the radio buttons also, if you want the user to select all the radio buttons, you add each radio button to a separate group. But first of all, group means minimum you should have two radio buttons. Am I clear? Group means you should have minimum two. Suppose here wantedly, I'll make this as group two. This doesn't make sense. I can't call it as a group because group means minimum two. So when you do the syntax check, I'm expecting an error. Good. What is saying here? The radio button group GRP2 contains only one parameter. So group means minimum what? Two. So in your case, if you want the user to select multiple options, don't go for what? Radio buttons. Go for what? Checkboxes. So that the user can select, means the appearance of the checkbox would be different. The checkbox would be something like this. Anyhow, we'll see that going forward. The checkbox will be something like this so that user can select what? Required options. User can select all the options. User can select what? Multiple options like this. We'll be seeing that in the coming sessions. I repeat, when do we go for radio buttons is when you want to restrict the user to select only one option in the list of options, you will go for radio buttons. It makes logical sense. If you want the user to select multiple options, then recommended to go for what? Check boxes. Yeah, Madhu, you are about to ask something. You said any
No, thank
questions?
you. Thank you. Thank you. I
Fine.
understood
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Yeah, others, is it clear to everyone? How to check the conditions, if condition. And why I have to check with X only? Because I told that a reader button will have only either what? X or space as what? Values. When you will have X, if the radio button is selected, you will have X. Otherwise, you will have what? Space. I'll debug this program. At this stage, we have not started with the debugging. So forget about that. But just for curiosity, I'll just show you the debugging. Debugging means I want to show you how it is getting executed internally. Okay. So we have not started debugging. So forget about that. In the coming session, we'll discuss from the scratch. So what I'll do, I'll set a breakpoint kind of thing here. Let me activate first. I'll set the breakpoint here. Yeah. Now let me execute, try to focus. I'll select product. I'll select product. So internally, what are the values of the radio buttons? Internally, at this stage, P underscore R1 is space because it is not selected. P underscore R2 is also space. P underscore R3 is what? X. P underscore R4 is space and P underscore R5 is also what? Space. So when I execute, it is taking the control to the debugger mode. We may not understand this at this stage, so just leave it for the timing. I'll open the old debugger. Okay, so what I did here on the selection screen, I entered some values. Two input values I entered. What are my input variable names? P underscore X. What is the value I entered? 10 only, na? P underscore Y. What is the value I entered? 20. And how many radio buttons we have? 5 radio buttons, out of which third one I selected. So if you see the R1 value here, R1 is showing as what? Space, means not selected. R2 is also what? Space, not selected. What else? P underscore R3 is what? X because you are selected. Okay, P underscore R4. It is again what? Space because you are not selected. P underscore R5 is again what? Space, not selected. Okay, done. So right. I'm trying to check the condition here. See the arrow pointer. This is the arrow pointer. It is trying to check this condition. Okay. So how do we execute one statement? I'll press F5. Is the condition satisfied? No, na. What is the value of R1? Space. But I am checking for what X. So condition not satisfied. So what is the behavior? The control should jump to the next condition check. So when I say F5, since this condition is failed, control will go to this else if. Let me say F5. Yes, control is going to the else if block because the first condition is not satisfied. R2 equal to X. No, R2 is space currently. Again, this also is failed. It will not enter that else if, it will go to the next condition check. I'll say F5. Yes, it is going to the next condition check. What is the value of R3? X, na? Okay, here also I'm comparing with X. This condition is satisfied, na? It will enter that particular block. Since this condition is satisfied, it will enter that block. So I'll say F5. Yes, it has entered the block. It has entered the else if block. What is the value of X? X value is 10, Y value is what? 20. And what is the current value of RES? Current value of RES is 0. Yesterday we have discussed now. By default, integers will contain what? 0. Done. I'm performing the calculation. What is the calculation? Product. So if I say F5, what is the value I got for RES? 200. I need to show this 200 to the user in the LPS screen. How do we do it? By using what? Write statement. I'll say F8. I got the result. Product of two numbers is what? 200. Like this, the program will be executed internally. Any questions? How to debug? We'll understand after 4-5 days. Don't worry about that. For the rest of the course, we'll focus on the debugging. We'll start with that after a few sessions. Any questions in this? Please ask. Clear to everyone? Anuradha, Sindhu, Ramakrishna, Prashant, Pavan, Nishi, Rahul. Okay. So do one thing. We understood the basic programming. We understood what is data statement, what is parameter statement, blah blah blah. So keeping this program in mind, what you do is try to do this exercise. I'll discuss this in the tomorrow session, but you try to do on your own. 1 second. The assignment is okay. Instead of radio buttons, you try to design check boxes. Means you need to know how to design the check boxes. How to design the check boxes. Okay, so when do we go for checkbox? When you want to allow the user to select multiple options. So here the user assume that you will select product, you will select what? Division. Okay, so what are the validations I want? Default the same input field. Okay, this validation doesn't make sense here. Yeah. So what is this validation here? On click of what? On click of what? Execute button. On click of execute button, identify what? The selected checkboxes. User might select 0 or 1 or more. Identify the selected checkboxes. Perform the required calculations and display the same. So in this case, assume that the user has selected product and what? Division. Okay, so I should get the division here. So I should get both the things. So your exercise is, your focus is how to design these checkboxes and how to identify the selected checkboxes. How do we do it? How do we approach now? Where do we check it? Again, the checkboxes also I want it on the selection screen only. Na? So today we are seeing how to design the radio buttons. Similarly, there might be some syntax for designing the checkboxes. So type parameters keyword, type parameters. Yesterday I told you, you can check the documentation. Put the cursor on the parameter, anywhere on the parameters, press what? F1. If I press F1, I'll get the online documentation. Online documentation. Okay. Try to do R&D here and check where exactly you have the checkbox information. Okay. It's not so easy to use. We are at the initial stages. It takes some time to understand the documentation and to search in the documentation. I'll click on screen options or I'll click on type options. It is not talking anything about checkboxes. I'll go back. I'll click on screen options. Yes, we have seen what? Radio button. We have discussed what radio button. Somewhere they are talking about checkbox. Okay, so I'll just click on this. They gave some syntax here. They gave some syntax. Okay, scroll down. Okay, they gave only the syntax here. So refer to that syntax and check whether you can do it or not. Anyway, I'll do it, but as a practice, This is the assignment for today. Instead of radio button, go for check boxes. So in the real time also remember, you or me cannot remember all the syntaxes because you have thousands of statements, you have thousands of options. Just we should remember the main statement, press F1, it will open the online documentation, analyze the documentation, refer to the examples and do. Okay, so here I press F1, I got some documentation, but they gave that screen options as checkbox is there. When I click on this, they gave some notes. This addition determines that the input field is in the first done. The checkbox is selected if the value of so and so is X or what, capital X or what, small x. Okay, good. In the radio buttons, it is not allowing me small x. Here in checkbox, it is either capital X or what, X. Otherwise, it is what, not selected. Good. So what is the meaning? In case of checkbox, if it is selected, it will contain what? I can compare with what? Capital X or what? Lowercase x. If it is not selected, by default, it is what? Space. Okay. So they didn't give any example here. They didn't give an example, but you try to do on your own. By referring to this one, try to do on your own. Or else one more input I can give is, what is the T code we have used so far? SC38. Okay, let me show you other T code. Okay, there is one more T code which is helpful for us. ABAP docu, ABAP DOCU, ABAP docu, ABAP docu. When I go to this T code transaction, ABAP docu, it has opened the keyword of same that, but you may have examples here. Okay, here we have what? ABAP examples. Okay, here let me search for radio buttons. I'll search for radio buttons. I'll continue. No, so it is not showing anything like that. Okay, so I'll just check it individually. I'll check this. Okay, ABAP statements overview. If I double click on this, yes, we have many things. So you need to check this. It will take some time. It will take some time. ABAP programming language. So done. I'll just search for radio. When I click on radio button, I got something like this. If I open this, I got again some documentation here. Okay, let me check for checkboxes. Simply I'll say check. Yes, they gave what? Check here. So you need to check each and everything. It will take some time. Okay, let me go back again. So this is related to memory, it seems. This is related to ABAP dictionary. Okay, overview of all predefined types, attributes, done built-in functions. So just go through this. Okay, you can see here ABAP reference. In the ABAP docu, I'm just checking. Somewhere here we have what? User dialogues. Good. What is this? Under this we have what? Selection screens. Okay. Yeah, we have something like this. Creating the selection screen overview. I'll click on this. Nothing is there. I'll click on this. Parameters is there. I'll click on this. Type options, screen options. I'll click on this. Okay, it has opened the same thing here, but there is no what example for this. So like this, we need to do R&D. It will take some time. We are only at the initial stages. You need to refer to documentation, check the syntax, and accordingly, we need to use that. Okay, so try to do this exercise. Okay, tomorrow I'll try to do this check boxes with some other features in that. But try to do this assignment as a practice. Okay, we have started the programming part from yesterday only. So practice that. Start practicing. Otherwise, what happens is, while listening to the sessions, everything would be easy. But after 1 month, the story will start. Okay, so start practicing from day one so that you can become strong on the subject. Okay, getting knowledge is different, becoming strong is different. So our agenda is not to gain the knowledge, to become strong in ABAP. Okay, so start practicing.